Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Call to Mind Live, Preventing Teen Suicide in a Pandemic of Isolation. I'm Michael Monks, host of Cincinnati Edition here at WVXU in Cincinnati, and I am so grateful that you could join us for this important conversation. This program is a co-production between Cincinnati Public Radio and Call to Mind, American Public Media's initiative to foster new conversations about mental health. Our event is supported by the PBS NewsHour Student Reporting Labs and part of the Well-Beings Youth Mental Health Project and its Well-Beings Tour. Well-Beings is a national mental health initiative led by the public media organization WCET in Washington, D.C. Now, we all know how difficult this past year has been. We've seen our lives disrupted, upended, and changed forever. Some of us have lost friends and loved ones, and we've learned new ways to cope. For young people across the country and here in our own community, the experience has been possibly even more challenging. While we're living under a pandemic, our nation has also been gripped by an epidemic impacting every community and school district. Teen suicide. It's a growing problem in our country. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention reports 1 in 4 young adults contemplated suicide during the pandemic. And suicide consistently ranks as the second leading cause of death for young people ages 10 to 24. So, what are the warning signs of suicide, and how can potentially at risk youth be identified with time to intervene? That's what we'll talk about today, and you are an important part of this discussion. We want to hear from you during this program. If you have a question or a comment for our guest, you can use the Zoom Q&A, or if you're watching on Facebook Live, simply leave a question in the comments section there, and we'll get to as many questions and comments as we can. When you post, please let us know your name and your age and the city that you're in. And we thank you so much for being with us today. Before we start this conversation, we want to hear from some of our partners.
WETA, with a coalition of partners, welcomes you to the Well-Beings Youth Mental Health Project. Hi, I'm Bill Pullman, and I'm honored to be with you as we launch this national campaign from public media. Well-Beings is a groundbreaking project at a very important point in time. Mental illness disproportionately affects our young people and the most disadvantaged populations among us. The growing mental health movement has set the stage for dramatic change, to raise awareness, to reduce stigma, to focus on prevention and early intervention, and the promise of more research for new treatments. Together, we can bring mental illness and discrimination out of the shadows, and it's not a day too soon. So thank you for being here today.
The signature documentary series in the Well-Beings campaign is Ken Burns Presents Hiding in Plain Sight, Our Mental Health Crisis. Produced and directed by Ewers Brothers Productions and written by David Blistine, the film will explore, through lived experiences, the youth mental health crisis in our country. Currently in production, this 4-hour documentary film is slated to air on PBS stations in spring 2022.
Wellbeings.org and hashtag Wellbeings will be adding content every week over the 2 years, including Brave Teens, where teen storytellers go on the record about their mental health journeys.
And Brave High, a digital feature-length documentary where students in high school productions share their mental health stories through spoken word, music, and dance without fear, shame, or stigma.
Out of the Dark, a short-form digital series that will profile lives transformed by mental health challenges, highlighting the power of difference.
PBS NewsHour's Student Reporting Labs engage high school journalism students as correspondents that report on youth mental health from more than 150 high schools across 46 states.
Mental health affects all of us. We all experience various levels of mental health and well being through our lifetime. According to the CDC, half of us will experience a mental illness at some point in our lives. Call to Mind's goal is to bring this topic out into the open, to get people talking, to increase understanding, and using all of our media platforms, news, shows, live events, podcasts. We are engaging the American public in a conversation about mental health.
And now for our conversation. We are joined today by two teenagers who share their personal stories and passion for mental health awareness with the hope that it can help other teens. Leliana Sidnor is an early graduate from West High School this year. She is actively involved in the National Alliance on Mental Illness Ohio's Youth Move Group. That is a youth-led organization. And Leliana is with us here. Leliana, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's our pleasure to have you. Thank you for being with us. And just a moment while I recollect myself here, a little technical difficulty on the movement of my script. And I want to make sure that I introduce you appropriately with all of the work that you're doing. And so, Youth Move is a youth led organization devoted to mental wellness. She lives in Columbus, Ohio, I should note. So, Leliana is joining us from Columbus, Ohio today. We're also joined by Tali Rosen, also a high school senior at Beacon High School in New York City. She's a member of the class of 2021. Tali wrote an op ed for the New York Times about her experience losing a friend to suicide. That op ed was titled, "There is no vaccine for teenage despair." Tali, welcome to our program.
Thank you so much for having me.
And also with us today, Dr. Courtney Cinco, a child and adolescent psychiatrist at Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center. Dr. Cinco, thank you so much for being with us.
I am so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure to have all of you with us today. It's also our pleasure to have all of you listening in the audience. A reminder that you are welcome to participate in our conversation. Simply leave a question or a comment for our panel in the Zoom Q&A, or if you're watching us on Facebook Live, just leave a comment and be sure to leave your name, your age, and the city where you are so that we can recognize you when we ask your question or read your comment. Leliana, I would like to start with you. You've dealt with more than suicidal thoughts. You've experienced suicide attempts, and I'm hoping you can tell us about how old you were and what you were faced with that made you feel that way.
Um, Honestly, I don't really know where to start with this difficult topic. Um, Depression started with me when I was like the age of 7 years old of, losing a sibling. He was 2 years old when he had passed away. So that right there was, very traumatic and difficult thing to deal with growing up in the household. Um, as I got older, I started to notice like my mood changes and stuff like that. But growing up, I seen a lot of things. I seen my mom get physically abused every single day from then on. I was also sexually assaulted, so that made things, worse for me. But as far as suicide, I started like thinking of it and making attempts at the age of 12 years old. Definitely wasn't easy, especially coming out about everything that had happened. I just had to, I guess, find a light in the situations that I was dealing with, make it a better example of ways that you can overcome it. You're not alone in the situation. There's multiple people just like you dealing with it.
We're so grateful that you're showing your bravery and your courage today, being willing to share such a difficult story with people with the hope that it impacts them in a positive way. So thank you for being so willing to talk about such difficult topics. And you talked about seeing the light, Liliana. I know that you found some light and you're trying to
Yes.
share that with the rest of the world. And I'm going to come back to you momentarily and we're going to talk a little bit about the work
Okay.
that you're doing to help others. But I want to bring in Tolly Rosen, who joins us from New York City as well. You know, the op-ed page is a prestigious place in the New York Times, Tolly, and you managed to have a byline there as a very young person. But of course, unfortunately, it was under tragic circumstances. Can we talk about what you wrote about the friend that you lost in 2017? Tell us about her.
Um, she was a very happy person. At least that's how I knew her. And at the funeral, when the cause of death was not known, it wasn't, people weren't aware of the conditions around her death, and everyone just overwhelmingly was talking about her bright personality, which she had. She'd light up a room, and that's the thing, that there's so many people whose stories and whose parents say, well, they were always their happy self, or I never even imagined that this was what they were going through.
You wrote that when your friend's death was reported, it was described as being under mysterious circumstances while she was sleeping. How did you later learn the truth?
Initially it was she died, and that was all we knew. There was a post on her Finsta, a friend Instagram, very kind of cryptic, saying, just threw up, think I'm gonna die. And we later learned, about 6 months later, that she had overdosed, and it was a reopening of all of the feelings, but before, the questions that also had no answers, like how can a healthy 12-year-old just not wake up, were replaced with a ton more unanswerable questions of what was going on in her head, and just how could we have helped her. I honestly, we kept in touch, but I wouldn't say she was my best friend, um although I loved and cared for her very much. And definitely part of the grieving confusion was how strongly I felt for her, and such the short amount of period that I did know her. And with suicide, there's definitely, everybody's affected, no matter how close you are. But I definitely think that there is this, I'm not sure what the right word would be, but feeling of, I don't have the right to grieve, or I didn't know them well enough. And it's just hard, no matter how close you are to the person, to handle that and to figure it out, because there's no right way to feel it, but nobody knows what to feel.
I wanted to ask you about that because you touch upon that in the op-ed that was published in the New York Times. You wrote that at your friend's funeral, people were weeping heavily. They knew her, they were close to her, they might have been related to her, and that you were embarrassed by your own intense sadness over someone with whom you shared a tent for 2 weeks. And you observed that you started to pose questions to yourself over the validity of your own sadness because you had thoughts that it could have been you.
um yeah, I felt very connected to my friend's death for many reasons. I myself have, you know anxiety and thinking, and adolescence is not easy, no matter what. And was definitely, as somebody who was very aware of my thoughts, and of, as you grow up, you have different connections to your thoughts. When, what does a thought mean? And the idea of I could do this, but does that mean I want to do this? And it's very isolating. And it was just ideas that I had thought about for myself, seeing them play into fruition and play out. It was like I was watching an alternate reality. And although teenagers, and we are all, I would say, she was a very intelligent person, but as her dad wrote in, he wrote a piece shortly after she died, saying she was still a teenager's brain and grasping consequences or actions is still something we're developing. And so there's the feeling of I'm tremendously sad and I don't know how to keep going. And also saying, well, I also don't want to die necessarily, but I don't know what to do. And it just can be very isolating.
Tolly, we'll come back to you to talk more momentarily. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us so far. I want to bring in Dr. Courtney Cinco from Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center. Dr. Cinco, we've heard just from Tolly and Liliana that there are a lot of ways that young people learn about suicide or are faced with someone who has died by suicide, or how they come about feeling or materializing suicide ideation on their own. Can you talk a little bit about that? That there seem to be a variety of ways that young people are introduced to this or troubled by it.
I think it comes from just about everywhere, right? It can come from inside, it can come from knowing someone who talks about it or thinks about it, it can come from social media. Um, but sometimes it's just spontaneous. You feel bad, and most of us have had a thought of like, what if I wasn't here anymore? What would that look like? And then sometimes that goes deeper, and then it can go deeper and deeper and deeper. Unfortunately, it is very common, and it's okay to have those thoughts.
Well,
But it's what you
we're
do with those thoughts that's important. What's important?
we've heard two stories that took place prior to the pandemic. We are talking about an increase in this type of thinking or experiences during the COVID-19 pandemic. You're at Cincinnati Children's, and it seems that one of the major struggles here for young people who are experiencing suicidal ideation is that they can't turn to their usual coping skills to address any mental health challenges. Can you talk a little bit about what that means and how it's impacted young people?
Yes, yes, absolutely. So, what happens when you are growing and you're a teenager is you start to develop in the context of your relationships with others. So, you know who you are, you gain self esteem, you gain self worth from going to school, meeting friends, having activities, all of these kind of quote unquote normal things that you do in middle school and high school. With the pandemic, uh, all of those things have been kind of outlawed, right? So not only do you have this social isolation that comes with being in virtual school and being at home all of the time in the same place, in the same place, in the same place every day. But then when you go to do the things that normally would make you feel better and make you feel whole, you don't have access to those. So it's a double hit right now with the pandemic to our kids.
Are you seeing an increase at Children's Hospital in kids seeking help or needing help?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We are up 46% in our referrals compared to last year at this time. And I can tell you that currently we are unfortunately overflowing with so many kids struggling with their mental health and just need us.
A reminder that if you're watching on Facebook Live and you want to leave a question or comment, simply do that in the comment thread. Make sure you leave your name and your age and the city from which you're responding. And you can also leave a question or comment in the Q&A box on Zoom. We want to take a question now. This comes from the PBS NewsHour Student Reporting Lab.
Hi, my name is Mary Williams, and I'm currently a junior at the University of Cincinnati. In some ways that I cope with remote learning, isolation, and limited time with friends is leaning more towards my old middle school self. I write, I read, and I listen to music to pass the time. It made me remember and realize that the love and joy that I have around me is still around me, it's just in a different form. My questions are, what suggestions do you have for staying optimistic at a time like this? And if I know a friend that's going through a way worse situation, who should I tell?
Dr. Cinco, why don't we have you
Okay.
address that question first?
Um, I think it's very hard for all of us to stay optimistic with everything that's been going on. Um, there's there's our COVID pandemic, but then there are a lot of other things we're struggling with, right? School, social justice, all of these things that are kind of hitting right now. So it's hard to stay optimistic. But I love what they just talked about, like doing things that you know help you feel better that don't necessarily involve a lot of other people. Music is my all time favorite coping skill. I love writing, I love drawing, but also trying to stay connected to those people you do love and care about and reminding yourself over and over and over again like, I might feel alone, but I'm not alone. I can talk to my cousin, I can talk to my brother, I can talk to my sister, I can talk to my parent. Like, whoever it is, remember that they're there for you. And then the second piece is if you're worried about a friend, if you feel like, oh my goodness, I don't know what to do, I think they're going to hurt themselves, or I'm worried that they're not doing well, you have to find it in you to find a trusted adult and tell them, someone who can help you. Staying silent, I know it can be easy, but that's probably the worst thing you can do because that person likely needs help. And even if they get mad at you for saying something, it's better to see them stay safe than to hurt themselves.
Thank you, Dr. Cinco. Let's bring back Liliana Sidnor from Columbus. And I want to talk a little bit about, after all the experiences that you went through, that you were so brave to share with us on today's program. You're now involved in an organization, NAMI Ohio's Youth Move Group, so that you can help others. So talk a bit about what that group is and your role in it.
Um, well, I've been working for this job for I want to say almost 2 years now. Um, I'll make this short. My role is to report back to my boss. Sometimes we travel out and we get to sit on panels and stuff and talk about like what can be improved in the systems of care, if that makes sense. Um, for example, I know that I was sitting on a state committee and I got to put in my input about how it was for me to be hospitalized, for suicide, stuff like that. Like what helped me, what didn't help me. And they write down and they take their notes, and they make it seem like they can like, fix it to improve the systems. With me, when I travel and stuff, which my motion sickness is terrible. I'll throw that out there. Motion sickness terrible. But but I love my job, and I want to be a mental health therapist when I grow up. Well, I guess I'm grown up now, but
You're so
I
young, but you
definitely want to
have
go to.
grown up. And I wanted to ask you
Yes.
about that. I mean, do you think, is it your past experiences that you think have pushed you in that direction, educationally and professionally?
I mean, honestly, yes, I feel like it did push me, but growing up even as a young child, my mom was always sick. So I would always have to get her medications, help her, encourage her, you got this, keep going. So even back then I felt like I was always like a big help to a lot of people. And with me going through the things that I've been through, I'm living experience, anything is possible in life. You just gotta push yourself. You gotta want the help. And with Dr. Cinco, everything that you said, I totally agree because I've been in that situation multiple times where a friend would tell me, oh, I don't want to be here, and stuff like that. So definitely listen to her when she said that. Go to a trusted adult because most likely that person needs help.
Thank you, Liliana. Let's bring back Tolly Rosen from New York City, and you were so thoughtful to expand upon the op ed that you wrote and had published in the New York Times. I'm wondering if you could share with us as a teenager what being shut in during the pandemic has done, either to your mental health or to that of your friends.
Um, when everyone says, don't see people, don't do things, that's hard. And as somebody who uses events and friend gatherings to kind of be like, well, this may be a hard week, but I'm going to make a plan and I'm going to look forward to it. And it's a really great coping mechanism that I think a lot of people use. And it was definitely, it sucks to have as able to be told, it's not that, we're doing it for the safety of people, but to be told you can't do this. And so for younger people, they have no choice in the matter. And it's hard. And I think that we need to leave room for the hard. And while it's definitely good to stay optimistic, I think that we can get into trouble when we try and force the happy. Because when coping mechanisms are taken away and you're in the same place every day, and you don't necessarily, if you don't have a good home life or you're not happy with the social circle you're in, you really can be alone. And I think the best thing that parents can do is to leave room for that, because it's really hard to accept. It's a really hard truth to accept that outside circumstances are making me feel sad and I can't do anything about it. And it's really hard as parents or people to watch the people you love be in situations that you can't fix. And the best thing you can do is leave room for this sucks and there's no solution. Because when you start saying you need to be happy or why aren't you better yet, that's when people stop telling you what's going on. That's when they just put the fake smile on and say, no, I'm fine. And that's when you get the 6 months later, I don't know what happened. And even though it's hard to watch, we need to leave room.
And we are taking your questions and comments here in the live Zoom Q&A, or also on Facebook Live. Just simply leave your question or comment in the comment thread. Leave your name and your age, and we'll try to get to as many questions and comments as we can. Alyssa from Austin, Texas writes, as a pediatrician psychiatric nurse, I've noticed our inpatient admission rate has greatly increased during the pandemic. And so Alyssa is looking for ways to support teens and help them with a safety plan at home outside of the hospital environment. Dr. Cinco, perhaps that's something you could address.
I can definitely address that. I want to say I feel you on that. It's so hard to watch all of our teenagers and children struggle with this. I would say that when it comes to safety planning and thinking about what goes on at home, the most important part of creating a good safety plan is talking about who are the trusted adults that someone can talk to when they are feeling unwell or suicidal. It doesn't have to be parents, it doesn't have to be anybody in the house, but it has to be someone they agree to talk to when they're not feeling good. Because it's the connection that matters most when you are depressed and you are suicidal, and you're down in that hole. If you can connect to somebody, that's the best thing you can do to keep yourself safe and alive.
Another question for you, Dr. Cinco, from a viewer or listener named Sarah, who is the mother of two teenagers, wants to know, what are the warning signs parents should be watchful for, ways to encourage kids to open up about their feelings and their struggles?
So the biggest warning signs that I counsel all parents about are behavioral changes. Like if you are worried that something's up, something's probably up. Isolation, that's the other big one. If you haven't seen your kids in a while and they're just like refusing to come out of their room, and I know that's virtual school, but still beyond that, like if you haven't seen them, please go check in with them. Other things that are warning signs, big warning signs would be saying goodbye to people, especially on social media, um, use or experimenting with drugs or alcohol. That's another big one. Or recent suicide of someone that was close to them. That's another big risk factor. And then lastly, I would say that the biggest thing you can do to keep your kids safe is to talk to them, is to just be honest with them and say, hey, I'm worried about you. What's going on? And just get to know them and what's going on in their life at that point and keep an open dialogue and try not to be judgmental and just, I love what Tally said, leave space for feelings. Like sadness is okay to have. Anger is okay to have. They're just feelings. But if you can leave that space, kids feel more supported.
As we start to wind down this first segment of today's program, I want to give our two teen guests the opportunities for some parting words. Liliana, if there are kids like you watching who may have similar experiences and hope to come out to find that light that you talked about, do you have any words of encouragement or advice?
Definitely. When I was dealing with everything, I didn't think that there was a solution. I just thought that I was going to be depressed for the rest of my life. Turns out no. That's not how it's going to be. If you actually want the help, you will get it. You have to put in the percentage that you need to put in. For example, with me, I never let it affect me in school. I always still maintain honor roll, and I say that only because I love school. If I miss a day of school, I'll cry. But so school is just very important to me, and the light that I was talking about was don't don't let it stop you. Just keep going, because at the end of the day, if you don't, it's only going to affect you and your future. With me, I always told myself, no, I don't want to be like this for the rest of my life. We got to keep going, and that's what I did. And I graduated high school early. I have multiple opportunities that's lined up for me. I am also going to be joining the military. So, with everything that I have been through, from losing a sibling to constantly seeing my mother get abused to being sexually abused, I don't let them things define who I am. I decided I wanted better for myself. So, that's what I did.
Thank you for sharing that. And Tolly, as we start to say goodbye, some parting words for our viewers. You've been so wise today. Um, some words of advice, perhaps, for teens like you.
Um, Definitely. Um, just it can feel very permanent when a lot of changes are going on during adolescence, and the most important is just to remember that it's not permanent, and that's why it's so helpful to keep talking about it, because the more people feel like they're not alone, and the more people feel like this is a really hard feeling and these are really intense emotions, but I know that I will feel this, I know I will survive, and I know I will get through this. And we just have to keep talking about it and showing and saying, yes, that is true, even though it may feel impossible.
Tolly Rosen is from Beacon High School, where she is a senior. It's a school in New York City. And Liliana Sidnor is a graduate of West High School in Columbus. Thanks to both of you for sharing these stories with us and your thoughts. We're so grateful for the time you gave us.
Thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
having me. It's a blessing, honestly.
Glad to hear that. Dr. Cinco will be staying with us for our next segment, and we'll get to that momentarily. I want to let you know that if you or anyone you know is currently in a crisis or thinking about suicide, please hold on. Help is available for you 24/7. Reach out to the crisis text line at 741-741, and then you text your state abbreviation, such as OH or KY or IN, to 741-741. You can talk to someone also at the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline by calling 800-273-TALK. 800-273-8255, or talk. And we turn now to our second half, and that's a look at schools and the work underway prior to the pandemic and during the pandemic to talk about the power of peer counseling and efforts in local schools. Our Princeton Community Middle School seventh grade principal and Hope Squad advisor, James Stallworth. James, welcome to our show.
Thank you for having me.
Also joining us is Hope Squad student participant and Lakota West High School senior, Rachel Curry. Rachel, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for this opportunity.
And you all, of course, remember Dr. Courtney Cinco, a child and adolescent psychiatrist at Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center. Before we get started in this part of the conversation, some quick background. Grant Egbers was a 15-year-old student at St. Xavier High School here in Cincinnati when he died by suicide. After Grant's death, his mother, Diane, learned many of his friends knew he had been dealing with suicidal ideation for months. So Diane founded the organization Grant Us Hope with the goal of preventing parents from going through what she did. But she also realized there was a possibility to reach teens sooner through the people they talk to the most, other teens. Grant Us Hope now includes peer to peer counseling from the organization Hope Squad, which operates in more than 950 schools in more than 30 states and also parts of Canada. James and Rachel are representing Hope Squad today. And James, let's start with you.
Okay.
Hope Squad at Princeton Community Middle School, was there any particular incident or situation that led the school to bring the organization in? Was this a preventive measure?
So, as you said, Diane Egbers really had the situation where she experienced that loss, and she really wanted to make sure that no one else went through that process. And so, by working with her organization and partnering with the Hope Squad and bringing it to school, she was trying to prevent that. And Princeton became a partner in that organization. And as we were beginning our process, we had not even put our Hope Squad into place when we had a sixth grader complete suicide. And so we now know that this is something that we have on the pipe, but we're actually seeing the need for it. And we're seeing what our students are going through. And we need to find a way that we're able to help and present support for them. And so through the training, through a lot of the connections that we've been able to find, we've been able to get support for the staff to be able to train and help the students so that we actually can go through and work to prevent and really support a lot of the students that are going through these things, because our building is sixth through eighth grade. Well, fortunately, we're in our district, but that means that we're looking at 12 through 14-year-olds who are having to deal with major situations like this. When you look at what Tally and Leilana went through, those are situations that are challenging for an adult to hear. But imagining what a 12 or 13-year-old is dealing with, having to find the emotions they might not even understand yet to go through and handle that.
Do you have any gauge on how the pandemic has affected your students' mental health? I imagine, like most school districts across the country, you've been in and out of the classroom in some hybrid fashion or virtual fashion, off and on. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So we are on a hybrid model. So we actually have just recently, just this past week, we reunited our hybrid students as we enter our fourth quarter. Thanks to the vaccinations, thanks to a lot of the social distancing and the mask wearing that we've been able to do for the past year. So, but leading into that, our students had been separated for the end of last school year. We spent it fully remote. And then the start of this school year, we did a hybrid model where the students were only in the building 5 days at a time, and then they would be home for 5 days. And with that, there's a lack of the socialization that they're used to. There's a lack of connection. What happens if the students aren't on the same hybrid split? So one of their best friends they might not see for an entire quarter, an entire semester. Even at our lunches are separated so the students aren't having as much interaction as they're used to. So the normal roar of a middle school lunchroom is now painfully quiet to kind of go through just because of the social distancing protocols we have to put in place. So it's very clear that, again, as we said, that there's a lot that the students are dealing with, and they don't know how to process it. They don't know how to handle it. And so we as adults barely know how to handle it. We're dealing with new levels of lack of social contact. um, I have to say that I'm normally a hugger, and so when you see people, and the fact that I can't go up and just give someone a big hug when you see them is something that you just really miss, and I'm sure that that's something. I'm not the only one in that situation.
Virtual hugs just aren't the same. Let's bring in Rachel Curry, a senior at Lakota West, who works with the Hope Squad at that school. And Rachel, would you mind just telling us what the Hope Squad does?
Yeah, of course. So, what Hope Squad is, it's a suicide prevention and a mental health awareness group. So, it's a student-led group, and it's really exciting to be a part of this group because we do so many things like throughout the school that help inspire students. That we wanna bring in hope. We don't wanna have like any sad feelings. I guess. I mean, we're like the eyes and the ears of the school. And it's just exciting to be a part of the group because it's really like uh, a big family that's all passionate about mental health. We love talking about mental health. We love talking about emotions and feelings. I get so excited about that. But some of the events that we throw through the school is called Hope Week, and we inspire students every day just by doing different things like a yoga day, or take that would be like our mental health day, and we'll like wear PJs all day, or we'll bring in therapy dogs. So those are some things that we do.
Well, that sounds strange to me. Perhaps I've been out of high school too long. I don't remember ever wanting to really talk about feelings as a teenager, but you make it sound so appealing. Is it a challenge at all to get your peers to engage in that type of conversation?
Um, Definitely, yes. Sometimes, everyone doesn't want to talk about their feelings openly like I like to. You know, um, it's hard to try and not pry it out of the students, but just like ask them like how they're feeling, or like if like they even want to talk about their feelings. You have to build up that trust, and you have to earn that, in order for them to even like say like how they feel. And so you can't just be like, oh, well, can you tell me how you feel and why do you feel like you should hurt yourself? You can't just say that to someone. They're going to be like what? So that's like one of the things that we've learned how to build up trust between Hope Squad and some of the students in our school.
And
Well,
one of
we
the
are
things that's
taking.
really
Oh, please go ahead, James.
one of the things that's really powerful about Hope Squad is that it really is a peer to peer organization. And so while the adults, like in our building, we have an administrator, a teacher, and a counselor that serve as Hope Squad advisors, and they are trained further than the kids are in terms of the ability to kind of go through and identify and support. And get the help to the teens that need it. But one of the things that we have to recognize as adults is that the teens will talk to other teens first, and they will kind of go through and they will have those conversations before they go to the trusted adults that they really need to go through to get the help that they need. And one of the things that we do through Hope Squad and as the program, we have a curriculum that is taught to the students that is vetted through trained educators and through mental health professionals, so that by the time that they're actually going out and interacting with other peers in the school, they've been trained by Hope Squad trained teachers, advisors, plus they're bringing in support, as you said, like with the advisors through Grant Us Hope, and also through medical professionals that kind of go through and also support that. Even for our building, we use a procedure called QPR, which basically goes for question, persuade, and refer. And I'm actually one of the trained QPR instructors. So I go through, and even as an administrator, normally people don't want to come to my office and don't want to see me coming to them, but I actually go into the classroom and I lead that lesson and I train the kids on the QPR strategy that's then reinforced through their actual classroom teacher. And then I also do staff professional development on that QPR method, so that, say that one of the counselor or administrator or teacher isn't their trusted adult, there are other adults in the building that can know and get the information and get it to someone who can help.
We're going to take some questions from the audience now. Again, you can leave questions in the Zoom Q&A or in the comment thread on the Facebook Live video. Simply leave your name and your age and the city from which you're writing. We've got a question from Luke. He's 16 and he's from Loveland. And he wants to know, how do I help a friend who is struggling with suicide? And while I know we haven't forgotten about Dr. Cinco, who's with us, she gave an answer to a similar question, but I was wondering perhaps if, Rachel, you could provide some advice as part of the Hope Squad. When you hear of something like that, what perspective do you offer?
So, as Mr. James was talking about, we do QPR training. So that means to question, persuade, and refer. So you always want to question like their intentions, like what Dr. Cinco was talking about earlier in the earlier session. She said like when they say things like when they try and say goodbyes to other people, like you want to question those, like why are they trying to say goodbye? Like what are their actions behind that? So you just want to watch out for your friend and see like if he or she does anything like that. You want to ask them like why do they feel this way? And why do you think that why do you think you feel this way, and why do you think you should like hurt yourself, because you feel this way, and then you want to persuade them. You want to try and get them to talk to a trusted adult. You want one of the things one of my advisors said is better to have a friend alive and be mad at you than have a friend dead. And that's one of the things that I always carry with me. I rather have a friend be mad at me for life, but I don't want that on my conscience that my friend died because I didn't want to help, or I didn't want to go to a trusted adult and tell them how one of my friends were feeling. So that's something that you definitely want to do. You want to go to a trusted adult, even if your friend doesn't, even if your friend doesn't want to go with you. You want to try and push your friend to go talk to a trusted adult because you don't want him gone. So I
Thank you
hope
for
that
that.
helped, Luke.
Me too. Jenna from Carlisle, Pennsylvania writes in to say that talk of depression and suicide happening at younger ages, even elementary, is a struggle. How can I help there? Dr. Cinco, are we seeing this as an increase also in younger children?
I would say absolutely. Our little kids are also feeling the COVID pandemic and all of the restrictions and all of the stressors. They absorb it like sponges. So if the family's stressed out, the little kids get that too. And they can't go outside and have fun with their friends either. Um, and I will say that, you know, just because a kid talks about it doesn't necessarily mean that they're really sick or they have to do interventions. It's just kind of a sign that they're struggling. So if you hear it, talk to them about it, see what's going on. Was it just a one time thing? And if you get worried, then seek help. But I think that if you hear that from a younger kid, do some investigative work and definitely talk to
We get to host a daily talk show here every day at noon on WVXU Cincinnati edition. And we did an episode about teen suicide that got really strong reactions from people. And Kelly from Cincinnati writes in December, following a report on Cincinnati edition on teen suicide, I decided to bring up the topic with my sons. I followed the panelists' suggestions and explained the differences between normal teenage thoughts and which thoughts are signs of a bigger problem. Could someone comment on those? Perhaps, Dr. Cinco, I could bring you back in. Are there normal teenage thoughts that, while may be concerning to hear if you're a parent, that may not be as serious as suicidal ideation? And how do you differentiate?
I think sometimes there can be a fine line. First, I want to say that parents know their kid the best. So if you have a gut feeling or if you feel like something's going on, not right, go with it. Just pursue it. Like if you go reach out to someone and your kid's okay, no harm done. Like at least you checked, right? But I think the biggest things to think about when it comes to like normal versus worrisome thoughts is sometimes it's okay to say, what would happen if I'm not here? Or I really had a bad day and I'm not doing well, or I'm struggling. But when you're seeing your teen talk about the bad day every day, or they're sad every day, or they're worried and on edge every day, those should be the biggest red flags. Like, just because we talk about suicide doesn't mean that people are going to commit suicide more often. It's way more important to talk about it, get the feelings and all of the thoughts out in the open than to try to ignore it and pretend it's not there.
We got a question from Jamie who's watching on Zoom. As a middle school and high school social worker, a recent dilemma I have encountered is self mutilation or cutting. What methods or approaches can I take to assist these students that is respectful, safe, and offers the best support? James, I know we want to respect the privacy of students at your school, but perhaps this is something you could talk about in your field, whether other administrators have talked about addressing this type of situation.
So there's a line, like you really have to go through and make sure that you care for every student that walks in the building. You want them to have the best experience that they can have in their life. And you know that when you're at school, what you really want them to focus on are the subjects that they're trying to learn. However, they're bringing in everything in the world, everything that happens at home, everything that goes on around them, and they're still learning their coping strategies. They're still learning how to go through and handle and process that. As we find out as adults what someone's going through and doing, we have to kind of go through and have that conversation first with the kid to kind of go through and see what can we do, what can we help, what level are we at with this particular situation, and then we have to go through and find out how can we support them. In some cases it may be a conversation with a follow-up, to kind of go through and look and see. In some cases it might be a referral to school nurse or to a trained physician like Dr. Cisco, in a sense, because that's the help that they need. But again, a lot of it begins with having the conversation and really trusting on the peers to go through and to know that they'll bring those students to you, and being the trusted adult that they're willing to bring those concerns to, so that it doesn't get to that point where it's something that becomes a life-threatening issue, or that they take cutting too far and they don't know how to kind of go through and stop the situation.
I think we all remember last spring, the pandemic had really taken hold of our lives, and schools were pretty much out, and graduation ceremonies were also canceled. So we got a comment via Zoom from Susan who says, last year, the class of 2020 received a lot of deserved public sympathy. The class of 2021, I feel, have suffered as well, but not much attention has been given to all they have lost for the past year. Will this group be ready for college or their next steps into adulthood? I guess who better to field that question than our resident high school senior, Rachel Curry? Perhaps you could help us with that one.
Yeah, I think just from speaking from experience, just with when the pandemic started, I was so sad. I was like, I'm a people person. I love to talk to people. I love to just go out and hang out with my friends, and just being like having to have that cut off and we couldn't do anything about it. I was just like, well, what am I supposed to do now? Like, I don't know what to do with myself. I just have to stay home and stay in my room and do homework. Like, who wants to do that every single day, all day? So when I started getting depressed after that, and my parents were like, Rachel, like, what's wrong? Like, are you okay? Do you want to talk about it? I was like, I don't want to talk about my feelings with you. I was like, what? But, I mean, I love my parents. And I mean, we started talking a little bit more, and I was just like, well, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm depressed. Like, I'm sad. Like, I'm not allowed to do anything. What am I supposed to do? And they told me, well, it's okay to feel sad first, and it's okay to ask for help. I felt sometimes I always feel like I have to put on a mask and just be like that happy person. But I know now that
Mm,
it's okay to be sad, and it's okay to cry, and it's okay to feel your feels. And so that's exactly what I
mm,
did. And I learned that uh, I think it just helped me become a better Hope Squad member. It helped me better understand my peers' feelings, because I know what they went through, because I went through it too, And so I learned that it's okay to share my feelings and tell them like, hey, I felt the same way too. Let me tell you like what I did so that maybe that can help you too. So what I started to do, I started exercising more, and just like getting to know myself more. That's what really helped me feel better about myself and helped me like relieve some of that pressure off, And now, yeah, some like teenagers now, we have been feeling, okay. I mean, we're not totally sad. We're all excited for college. We're ready to graduate. Okay. We know we haven't been getting some of that sympathy that 2020, the class of 2020 had, but we're just like, well, we're about to graduate. We're about to go to college. We're ready for our new life and we're ready for our new routine. And that's what we're really excited about. I don't think a lot of people are super sad about that. We're still getting a graduation this year. I know from my school, we're getting a graduation, and I believe we're getting a prom too, since we didn't get to have that last year. But um, we still have things to look forward to, and we still have things to be happy about, and we're still grateful to just like my school, we're in person. So we're just grateful to be in person. We're grateful to have friends around and that we can just, share our last year together and just, move on. So,
Well, it's a great
yeah.
perspective, and hopefully by the fall, when you are in college, that things will have some sense of normalcy to them. James, we did get an anonymous question asking, "How do I get a Hope Squad at my school?"
Well, what I would say the best way to kind of go through is depending on where their since it's anonymous, we can't kind of go through and say, but the Hope Squads are in all the different states. So the Hope Squad organization, I would actually reach out to the Hope Squad to find out, are there branches of Hope Squad in the actual state that they have. Once you have there, then you can reach out to maybe a partner organization. Like I said, for our area, we work through Grant Us Hope, which is a local area, which then also supports through the Hope Squad. So those two ways you can kind of go through. So Hope Squad does have a website. I believe it's hopesquad.org, and it is out of Utah. And I believe that if you go through and ask like on there and search for some of in their frequently asked questions, you'll be able to find the contact information for there, and they would be able to go through and help and support starting a Hope Squad in all the different places. Personally, and from my own experience, I think that every school should have a Hope Squad. I think that is something that we should kind of go through and have in place, because the power of it is that it looks different in each building. It looks like the building needs it to look. It acts like the building needs it to act, and it's going to support who the building needs it to support. And I think that that's what the power of the Hope Squad has in those particular buildings. And so I'm very much an advocate for that myself.
In our last minute together, let me bring back in Dr. Cinco. I'm sure there are a lot of people who are listening right now and may have recognized warning signs of suicide or suicide ideation and thinking, I've tried to bring this up with this person, I've tried to address this, but nothing seems to help. How do you get someone to keep trying or to find out what the next step should be if nothing else has worked?
I think if you're a parent and you're worried about your child and you haven't been successful in getting them to talk to you and you're still really worried, I think the first person or place to go is your pediatrician's office. They can help you guide you through this. And going to the pediatrician tends to not be a very stress provoking thing for most kids. So that's a good place to start. But if you are worried about immediate concerns, like take your child to the emergency room and we'll figure out everything later. Um, that's what I would say.
Well,
Can
thank you
I
for
jump in
that.
on that?
You sure can, Rachel.
Yeah, I mean, just from my perspective, if I had a friend and that was stubborn, that didn't want to talk about their feelings with me, well, I would just keep. I wouldn't push them to just try and just like just talk to me. I would just tell them that like, hey, I'm here if you ever do want to talk. But if you don't want to talk to me, I have another Hope Squad friend, or you can just talk to another friend of ours that, if you don't want to talk to me. Or I would go and ask them if they want to go talk to a Hope Squad advisor or a counselor, or just like a trusted adult or some kind of teacher, like their favorite teacher, whoever they like in the school. And that's one thing that's really has helped me throughout Hope Squad. But yeah, just gonna go. Yeah, you don't really want to just push them, but you want to, yeah.
I think, yeah, I think if you could get them to talk to anybody, there are so many people around, right? There's always people
Yeah.
to talk to that can help. But if we get to that point, like if parents are really concerned, I always throw that out there.
And our thanks today to Princeton Community Middle School 7th grade principal and Hope Squad advisor, James Stallworth, Hope Squad student participant and Lakota West High School senior, Rachel Curry, and Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center, Dr. Courtney Cinco. Thanks to all of you for being with us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And again, if you or anyone you know is in a crisis or thinking about suicide, hold on. Trained help is available to you 24/7. Reach out to the crisis text line at 741-741 by texting your state abbreviation like OH, KY, or IN to 741-741, or talk to someone at the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline by calling 800-273-TALK. And from all of us at Cincinnati Public Radio, Call to Mind, and WETA, thank you for joining us for this Wellbeings Tour event. This Call to Mind Live, Preventing Teen Suicide in a Pandemic of Isolation special program is co-produced by Cincinnati Public Radio and Call to Mind, American Public Media's initiative to foster new conversations about mental health. Our event is supported by the PBS NewsHour Student Reporting Labs and is part of the Wellbeings Tour, a national public media initiative from WETA focusing on youth mental health. You can find resources that support teen mental health in our Wellbeings Toolkit. Visit calltomindnow.org and wellbeings.org to find out more information. It's important to stick around. Don't go anywhere yet. Stick around for a few final messages from our partners, and please keep streaming. We hope you'll participate in a brief event survey and let us know how to make future events even better. Thank you so much for joining us today. For Cincinnati Public Radio, I'm Michael Monks.
I think there's so many things you can say about mental illness. It comes out of nowhere, and then it just creeps into your body, and you don't know how to deal with it.
It's a strange thing to look back on and think to myself, I really didn't care about anything at that point. Not caring if I wake up.
It became a very frustrating thing whenever I'd look in the mirror and there's nothing wrong with me on the outside. There's absolutely nothing wrong to make sense of that pain.
That moment that nothing else mattered to me, that I just threw myself in front of a moving car.
I told my parents what would happen if I wasn't here.
I still had a whole future that I had planned, it's like I was planning the suicide, but at the same time, I was making plans to go out to the movies with my friends the next week.
It's hard to endure, but it's just, take it one day at a time. And that's kind of how I've been living my life.
It affects my daily life all day, every day.
When I finally did start to think oh, I'm probably an addict, I was like, no, you're just lying to yourself.
I really want to live, and I'm trying to make the effort, and I want to have a good life. Maybe 1, 2 kids, not the white picket fence, but something that's livable, not this, but I want it. And I just want normal and mundane and average. Maybe a trip to Myrtle Beach every summer. I don't care. I'm sick of crazy, chaotic, up and down mess.
There really is light There really is. I know you're like, you don't know me. You have no idea of my journey. You have no idea. You're right, I don't. You're right, I don't. But I do know about lots of other kids' journeys. They are very different than yours, I'm sure of that. But what I know is that you're worth it. You have value. You are fighting this fight that you truly have no idea whether you're going to win or not. You're beyond courageous. You're beyond courageous. And you're stronger than you know. So keep the fight. Stay strong in your resolve, because you're worth it.
It's time to change the conversation about mental health.
When you know something is wrong.
When you feel alone. When you can't explain what hurts.
When every day is a struggle.
When you can't ask for help.
When your friend or family member seems fine on the outside.
But hurts on the inside.
Sometimes I feel as though I'm the only one that feels. But I know that's not true.
We can change.
We can change.
We can change.
We can make a difference.
There's power in our difference.
We can support each other.
We can fight stigma.
We say it's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay to have a mental health condition.
We all want to feel heard.
To find hope.
And to live in a world without stigma.
Without discrimination.
And we are a force to be reckoned with.
I am not what happened to me.
I am how I overcame it.
Stand with us.
And discrimination in mental health.
You can see the person, not the condition.
You can build understanding.
You can play your part.
The conversation changes with me.
With me. With me.
We are well-beings.
We are all well-beings.
The We Are Wellbeings story wall is a central part of the wellbeings.org website, social media platform, and the Wellbeings National Tour. We are asking the public of all ages to submit personal reflections, videos, photos, and short stories to offer hope, to foster understanding, to build community, and break down stigma.
What does being well mean to you? What is the one thing you wish people knew about mental health? What is your passion? What's your story?
Video can easily be submitted via social media using the hashtag #wellbeings or emailed to info@wellbeings.org.
Stories can also be submitted by uploading to Dropbox and live at Wellbeings Tour events. The We Are Wellbeing Story Wall is made possible through generous support provided by Wellbeing's Youth Mental Health Project founding corporate sponsor Otska and Wellbeing's media partner People.